Hey there, welcome back to Am I Tesla Guy? I've got a real treat for you on today's video. The Tesla Owners Club of Michigan recently had their annual summer meetup on the beautiful shores of Lake Michigan at the Pere Marquette Beach in Muskegon, Michigan. Just an absolutely beautiful setting. This meetup is for sure the largest meetup in Michigan, and I'm pretty sure it's the largest one in the Midwest. There were over 100 Teslas at this event, and of course more people than that. And as part of this meetup, there was a YouTuber panel. Several YouTubers that I'm sure you will recognize were on stage and getting some questions asked of them and sharing their thoughts on various topics related to Tesla and related to YouTube. And it was a real treat for me because I was actually the moderator of that discussion. So without further ado, let's get right into the panel.
All right. Can everybody hear me? Yes. All right. Fantastic. All right. Well, welcome. This is exciting. Be up on here with on stage with a bunch of people who I look up to and I've learned a lot from over the years, and get the opportunity to ask them any question I want. So hopefully none of them are too embarrassing. I'm just kidding. I won't ask any that are embarrassing. So I thought what we do is start, we're looking at about an hour, maybe just a smidge under an hour, and hopefully that can even get to a point where we include maybe some Q&A. And I thought I'd start by giving everybody an opportunity to introduce themselves and who they are, what they do, and then I'll get them some questions I have for them, and if we have time at that point, maybe we can do some Q&A, whether that be among those up here or out there. So real quick, my name is Mike Lichterman. I have a 2020 Model 3 and a 2022 Model Y Performance. And from a social media standpoint, I am known as Am I Tesla Guy, which to all of us here probably means Michigan Tesla Guy. But I do have a subscriber from Mexico who reached out and said, "Oh, my Tesla Guy." Because me is my in Spanish. I thought that was totally unintended, but it works fantastic. So that's me. Why don't we just go down the row here then?
Okay. Karl Bloss. So I wear two hats, Consumers Energy, as well as just started a YouTube channel, Zero E Michigan. And it's kind of funny because our program for home rebates also has the MI. So it's Power My Drive, right? And Power My Fleet. And by the way, if you got the swag bags, I don't know how far I want to go right now, but we do have some really cool rebate programs. And if you did the home charger rebates before, you can still get the $10 a month for charging off peak. So if you got any question, my colleague Justin is here too. We got the blue tent over there. But if you got any questions, we can get you some money towards charging. So with that.
I'm Brian. I'm from My Tesla Weekend. I'm a YouTube analyst and mathematician. I'm probably best known for knowing what is going on at all of the factories at all times in kind of every way. And I've been on YouTube for almost 3 years now, I guess. And it's quite an adventure. So I love to get out to things like this. I'm from the Pacific Northwest, but when Kelly invites you, you just can't say no. So I'm really excited to be here, and I'm glad to meet all of you folks.
Hi, I'm Cory Steuben. I'm president of Munro and Associates, but I'm best known for putting Sandy Munro on the internet. So the YouTube channel is kind of the fun part, but we tear down vehicles. So if you've seen some of our teardowns of the Model Y, the Model S Plaid, we have several Cybertrucks on order. So I think 55 or 60 million views of our teardowns. And Sandy and I are lucky enough to get to travel all over the world, visiting different factories and battery plants. So it's really been quite a wild ride. I'm really happy to be here. Sorry that I brought a Mach-E. I do technically own 5 Teslas registered in my name. Only one of them drives. The other 4 are completely destroyed. So just don't hurt me. All right, thanks.
Hello, everybody. My name is Chris. Full-time, I work on vaccines as a biologist. I'm also a husband and a dad. But in my spare time, as much as I can, I have a YouTube channel, Dirty Tesla, where I mostly right now am doing full self-driving stuff, of course, but it's an overall ownership experience with a Tesla, especially because when I first got mine, living on a dirt road, honestly, I didn't know is it going to like destroy this car or something? And it turns out it's like one of the best cars you can have for so many different situations. So started with the Model 3. Right now we own a Model Y and a Model X.
And in case you're wondering, if you haven't seen it already, it is sufficiently dirty.
Over there if you want to see it.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. I think I'll probably just go in the order we're sitting, if that's okay with everybody. So we'll start with you, Karl. I will just say, this is the first time I've met Karl in person, but I've known him actually for a couple years, and he is a huge help. So thank you, first off, because I reached out to him because I saw a post in one of the forums here in Michigan, and I reached out when we were getting our second at-home charger, and he just walked me right through, which I very much appreciate, and it's probably most of the reason I got the rebate, is because he walked me through it. So as somebody who works with an electric utility, and we're here in West Michigan, so we use consumers, what are some tips you can provide us EV owners as far as chargers, rebates, programs? Certainly you can speak to consumers if you happen to know any that are more general, that too.
Okay. Yeah, good question. And I forgot to mention, I'm a Model Y owner myself. Started out with the 2015 Model S, which we now recently upgraded. So I try to walk the walk. As far as what Consumers Energy is doing, and really it's most of the utilities now too. So if you're in DTE territory or if you're in Great Lakes Energy territory, they all have similar programs. And probably the main message I want to leave you with, if you haven't taken advantage of any home charging rebates, reach out to your utility because they all have programs. And before you buy anything, see if they have rebates on particular home EV chargers. So for example, in the Consumers Energy, if you, in the previous program, Power My Drive, the residential part, if you bought a home charger, if you got a ChargePoint home charger or an NLX juice box, we would give you a $500 rebate towards that. And it's a $600 unit, so you're essentially getting it, $600 or $700 unit, so you're essentially getting it for $100 or $200. Now you still need to put in the high power circuit, but what's new now is our program has actually shifted to rebating the home charging circuit installation. So the good news for Tesla owners is you can now essentially get the home charger, the Tesla wall charger, and it will still be included in that whole rebated program. Now the only caveat is because of regulatory limits, we are limited to rebating the 50 amp circuit, which if you get the home charger, the max that it goes up to is a 60 amp circuit delivering 80% of that to 48 amps, right? So if you want to get that full rebate, you're going to have to dial it down, and there's a way to do it. You can still use the Tesla charger, but you need to dial it down to delivering 40 amps. And then the other thing is, if you've gotten that rebate in the past, what used to be called Bring Your Own Charger program, where you essentially get rebated for charging at home overnight, you can now do both. You can double dip. So if you haven't done that, if you're already charging overnight, you're already doing what we're wanting you to do, which is to charge off-peak when the energy is available. And that's really the focus of the MPSC or any of the regulatory bodies. There's plenty of energy out there. One of the questions we always get, well, what about all these EVs? Is there going to be enough energy for that? The answer is yes, we have it already. And with the growth pattern that we see, we can do that if we get people to charge overnight. And what we find with those programs is 80 to 90% compliance because we're giving you money. So why wouldn't you charge overnight, right? So if you haven't done that, reach out to us, come see me, come see Justin. We can sign you up here today or go online, check it out, consumersenergy.com/EV. And other utilities are doing the same thing. So maybe that's the main message. Reach out to your utility. We can save you money.
Thank you for that. I may probably be reaching out to you about that again because it was the juice box that we got last time.
Yeah.
But those Tesla chargers, man, they're pretty slick looking.
They did just go up in price, $475.
I saw. So the second question I have for you, I figured you might know something about this, is, something I hear come up a lot when I'm talking with friends is multifamily housing. Whether that be, usually they're thinking of apartments, and the idea being of if we ultimately want EVs to go mainstream and be for everyday people, it seems like there's got to be a way to deal with or provide it to multifamily housing. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on that, what you see, knowing that you can't predict the future, but what you see coming down the pipe, or maybe there's something you can share that would help somebody if they do manage or own a multifamily housing setup that would be good for them to know.
Yeah, no, and that's a great question. And that is one of the big challenges. Obviously, if you have a garage or a driveway and you can just pull in and plug in, that's super easy. But if you live in what we call MDUs, multi-dwelling units, so an apartment, condo, anything like that, so you need to find chargers. How do you do that? Well, there's a couple, obviously the best thing is get in touch with your management and say, hey, I'm an EV driver, I need to charge, can you help me out with this? And again, consumers and the other utilities have programs for that, specifically for MDUs. And we do have solutions. There's, I just drove by the Watermark Center here, near the coffee factory. They have 2 chargers for their residents. And they're specifically for the residents, they have to have a special card. There's another system called the Orange Charger, which is a low power unit, but it's super easy because they can just install it in a regular 2-gang box. So unfortunately, they're all individual solutions, but there are ways to do it. But the best thing is reach out to your condo association, reach out to the building owner, and then ask them, hey, I have an EV, I'd like to charge, can you help me out? And we can provide, or we can help direct them towards solutions that there's no out-of-pocket cost to them. So I know they might think, oh, it's going to cost me thousands of dollars to do that. I need to go repair my pool, or I need to do these other things that are going on in the condo unit. But there are zero out-of-pocket cost solutions for them. And in fact, it can be even a profit center for them. So, for us EV drivers, they might be making a few bucks, but if I lived in an apartment and somebody put in charging and it cost me a little bit more than my home electricity, but I can charge my car, to me, that's super valuable. And there are ways to do that.
Still cheaper than gas.
Still cheaper than gas.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Karl. All right, Brian, my Tesla weekend up next.
Here we go.
So I've heard this rumor over the past few weeks that Ford and GM might be adopting okay, not everybody knows me. Okay, so that's sarcasm. On the might have heard, Tesla's charging infrastructure, really embarrassing for me to be asking you and Cory questions about this kind of stuff because I don't know anything about it. So adopting that, starting in 2024 with an adapter and then maybe in the cars in 2025, I'd love your thoughts on that first off, and then also what other EV manufacturers do you envision making that move? Who do you think will be soonest, and who do you think will be brought along kicking and screaming?
Okay. so I've seen people loving the move to other companies getting in on the supercharging system, on the network, on the standard, and I've seen people who hate it. And they say, well, there's too many cars coming in. This is, if every Ford, every GM, guys, it's not many cars. It's not a lot of volume we're talking about. And if it helps adoption, it helps adoption. The risk that the Tesla standard ran was that it could be legislated into obsolescence like it was in Europe. It was a better standard in Europe, but they went with CCS instead. And as a result, they're stuck with a worse system. There was a charger standard war, and it just ended. That battle is done. Once Ford came on board, the writing was on the wall, then GM. Now it's just a question of which dominoes are going to fall and in what order. And I think we'll see the small guys go first and then the big guys. I imagine Cory has a lot more insight on that. But this is an absolutely good thing. Now the question is, where does the war move from here? And it moves to South America, where the charging infrastructure hasn't been built. And there is an opportunity to get this to be not the NACS, but the ACS, but maybe even the CS, just the charging standard. We're not going to see it rolled out into Europe because they've already got tens of thousands of chargers that use CCS, CS, thank you. Yeah, too much HTML in my head, sorry. This is a great thing. The charger's handle is smaller, it's more elegant, it's more efficient, and at least on the Tesla side, it's more reliable, but that has more to do with the electronics from the handle all the way in both directions than it does the handle itself. And so as for who's coming next, I think Mr. Steuben here might have better information than me.
Well, I think who's coming next is less important than if the rest of them follow. So you nailed it. The war is over. And the benefit to the vehicle is also pretty big as well. So having torn down multiple vehicles, the cost of the wiring in a Ford F-150 and in a VinFast and in other vehicles we've analyzed is way more expensive. So Tesla, it's the whole ecosystem and it's the user experience. So if you drive a Tesla, which everybody does, and you're like, oh my God, now our charging stations are going to be filled with all these competitors, Tesla's collecting the data. So the data is almost more important than the actual monetization of the charging session. They'll be able to predict where they need to expand the charging stations almost faster than you can imagine. So I think there won't be as much of a problem as you may think of some stations being overran, because Ford and GM are already struggling ramping up the sales of their vehicles. So Tesla will be able to collect that data and see how people charge, and they'll be able to address it correctly. And one thing I was quoted on recently, I said, it's like it'd be like if General Motors owned the gas stations. So if you used to drive an internal combustion engine vehicle, imagine every time you filled up, it was owned by one OEM. A fraction of all of that fueling, or now with electric vehicles, a fraction of all that charging will go to fund the development of new Tesla vehicles and new Tesla infrastructure. So it's a huge win for Tesla, in my opinion. And I really can't predict who comes next. I know I have a ton of people clamoring for Rivian. I talked to a lot of Rivian owners that are just dying for a better charging experience. So I know they're asking for it. But what are your thoughts?
So on the data is the key. We get, the big beauty is now that GM and Ford are on board, these guys are going to be building trucks, and that means we may start seeing rural pull-through chargers, or at least highway pull-through chargers. That's going to help the Cybertruck. That's going to help the Hummer if they ever sell more than two of them, and that's going to help, the Lightning. No, it's a great vehicle, Mary led. It's important to remember. So it matters. So but the data is the key. You will know how many miles they're driving. You will know where they go. You will be able to get in front of them. And just for the branding alone, I have to go to the Tesla Supercharger. If you're saying the competitor's name every time you hit a charger, that's worth a lot of money right there. But yeah, in terms of who comes next, I agree. It doesn't really matter. It's just a question of when they decide to do the smart thing.
Real quick, I can't stay on script because, and this is actually what I wanted to turn in. I love when it turns into a conversation, but I also want to make sure not to leave anybody out. Real quick, to Cory's comment on the analytics of what Tesla knows from the charging, if you didn't see already, Tesla did put out a video on that, Tesla trip planning. And what's interesting, as wont to happen on Twitter, somebody watched it super slow-mo and caught some screen grabs. Chris, I actually think I saw you tweet one out or retweet it. And you actually can see on the screen the analytics of what they can see, how much of this charging location is in use, they're color-coded, how long is the wait by 5-minute increments. It's very cool. Look, I saw it on Twitter, so it's out there. Just look it up. The video was on YouTube as well. But I saw that, and I'm like, holy cow. In one sense, duh, right? Of course they know all that. But at the same time, it even backed up to a view of the entire United States, green, red, yellow, all locations color-coded by how things are going on, and it reroutes and everything. So anyway, I just want to point that out.
They also react to that. I remember when I first moved to Michigan, and my first trip out of town was heading out on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, like the biggest travel day ever. And I went to St. Joseph because we were heading to Kansas City, and I had to wait for 10 minutes. I was like, crap, right? But 10 minutes, no big deal. Well, before you know it, Benton Harbor is open, right? With a ton of chargers. So I think Tesla absolutely reacts to that and fills in the gaps.
And then, and I'll just add, and a lot of V3 chargers now.
Yes.
Just watch Chris's video on the trip to Florida. There and back. All right, another question for you, Brian, because I like to try, maybe there's this smart YouTube people or Facebook, Twitter, or whatever out there. So, you have multiple, hopefully I caught it all. I don't even know that I caught it all. Channels, do live streams, have a podcast, much more. I have seen you on other people's channels a lot lately too. I saw the Herbert one the other day, Brighter with I think they called that one Brighter with Brian, right? When you were on?
No, it's always Brighter with Herbert.
Okay. the joys and pain that come along with that. What is the number one piece of advice you would give to somebody wanting to start a YouTube channel today? Or maybe they've got one, it's really, really small, and it's just like, oh, I don't have any. What advice would you give them?
Boy, yeah. So there are only a few keys that I found that have been very successful, and it's all about playing the YouTube game, unfortunately, where you have to make a very exciting and punchy title, and sometimes the topic is not that exciting and punchy, and if you deviate from that, you annoy people, and if you don't deviate from it, you won't get views. But really, consistency is key, doing it a lot, and targeting over 8 minutes just because that's what YouTube wants, and but really consistency. And for my channel, it really stagnated up until about 20,000 subscribers, and then after that, I switched to daily. I moved my publication time to whatever the heat map said was when my viewers are on each day, which is 6 a.m. Pacific. And then I started trying to get just a little bit outside my area, cover other cars, other electric things, just not go too far out because then you lose them, but just expand it a bit and cover topics in other countries too to get viewers from there. And every time I go a little bit out, even if it doesn't get as many views, I get some more subscribers, which eventually results in views. But I think there might be people here who have more expertise on the subject of excelling in YouTube.
All right, thank you for that. Yeah, and I will admit that I got that same question for other people on the panel. So be ready. All right, Cory, nice to meet you, by the way. First time meeting you after watching you and your team a lot and listening to the podcast. If you had to pick one thing that is the biggest reason you see for Tesla's success, whether it be engineering mindset, a way they do something, what would that be, and why do you say that?
Yeah, now you asked me this question before we came on stage, so I had a chance to prepare. And what did I say? I said leadership. So I think Elon Musk and how he has led Tesla is the core tenet to how everything happens at Tesla, because in the absence of a really good leader, things start to crumble inside of an organization. So being at an engineering firm, myself and my team have fought so many hard battles that should have never had to have been fought because of bureaucratic walls that are put up in silos. So I feel like when we first got the Model 3, that was my aha moment when I saw the super bottle, which was a complete paradigm shift from how thermal systems were deployed on EVs, PHEVs, or MHEVs. And it just absolutely was mind-blowing. And there's actually another Munro and Associate person in the crowd here, Dave Overholtzer right there, Dave, who's worked with Munro for 17 years. And he's a Model 3 owner, and I think he bought it based on what he saw as well. So when I say leadership, I think Tesla as an organization had more applicants per job opening than almost any company I ever heard of. I thought there was 3 million applicants for 100,000 jobs. And it starts with leadership and culture, and then everything seems to fall in line. And I think Elon was interviewed early on when Tesla was getting along, and the whole charging infrastructure for Tesla was losing money. It is not a really rosy way to make money, but it was necessary for the user experience to get the type of adoption to have this many Teslas show up at this event today while all the other OEMs are lagging behind. So we're back to the charging infrastructure. It is really the feather in the cap, which really separates Tesla, and their vehicles are phenomenal from an integration perspective, and that all starts at the top.
All right, thank you for that. If we get a chance, I'm going to want to loop back on that one because I found the Twitter announcement with Ford and Tesla very interesting to listen to hear Elon and Jim talk to each other. But hopefully I'll loop back, though. If we have time, I'll loop back. So my dad, actually, how I got so involved with cars, my dad worked in the car industry for 40 plus years. And I grew up around cars and all that kind of stuff. So I was familiar with Sandy's name. In fact, I found out about Munro's YouTube channel from my dad. Now, I'm a former IT guy, and I'm finding out from, at that time, my 74-year-old father about a YouTube channel. I thought, holy cow, things have flipped here. But anyway, so I started watching. That was right when you all started, and it's been super fun for me to watch, both from the educational standpoint, because I already told you I don't understand engineering. I don't have that gene. But I'm fascinated by learning and how you all present it and listening to the podcasts and everything like that. And it seems to me, at least, it's been kind of a meteoric rise. And I would like to ask you a similar question that I asked Brian. What, if somebody's looking at starting something, maybe it's just for fun, maybe it's for a business or something, what would be one tip that you would give to them for a YouTube channel or something like that?
Yeah. So what I found is on YouTube in particular, you either have to entertain or educate, and you want to find a nice balance of that, and you have to be authentic. So when we put Sandy Munro in front of the camera, we never scripted anything, and people could see that. You know, a couple ums and uhs and fumbling here and there, that actually shows the viewer that this is really what this person thinks. So we try and keep that authenticity in all of our content. We rarely script anything, and that's really important so that the viewers know that it's really what we think. We also don't take any sponsorships from OEMs. We don't take any sponsorships from tier 1s or tier 2s to make sure that we are unbiased. And we cover more than just Tesla. So we did a full Mach-E teardown. We did F-150 Lightning teardown, a Rivian teardown, because our viewers actually need to see what a Tesla compares to other vehicles, or Rivian owners need to see how their vehicle compares to other. So, and the rise of YouTube in 2020 was really born out of the pandemic. So it was like a perfect storm of, we received our Model Y 5 days before Michigan shut down. And normally we have a stream of engineers coming into our facility, and we had this emergency meeting on like March 19th, and I pitched the idea of starting this website called MunroLive.com and having a YouTube channel to go along with it. And it actually initially got shot down because our team is like, we can't give this information away. So most Tesla owners aren't crazy enough to actually destroy their own car or have the funds to spend a couple $100,000, you know, buying it and then tearing it down and storing it and being safe when you're disassembling the battery. So I think that's our little sweet spot we found, is that we were able to take that step beyond just reviewing how a car works or how it drives or the features and show people what's under the skin. And we've kind of leveraged that and keep repeating that process. And now we have an amazing team of 3 people that produce the content. Eric is here right there. And he's our main producer, and we have a videographer and a graphic designer. So we essentially now have a full-time person that creates our thumbnails. So you're talking about thumbnails. We spend a lot of effort and money on the thumbnails to get people to click on our content. But that's about it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you guys are doing a great job. I will say, one that I enjoyed the most was when you guys tore down the 4680 pack.
Yeah.
First off, like, to watch, that didn't seem like it was easy to get into.
No, the price tag on that teardown was over $35,000 worth of labor that we paid people to chisel away at that, and machines that we rented to dry ice blast the foam away without damaging it. And then we did sell every single one of those 4680s for $800 a piece. And if you can do the math, 2/3 of the pack, or 3/4 of the pack, was about 600 cells. And I think we made about $500,000 in revenue off of selling the cells. So,
and you know, my first comment is, I think that's awesome. Like, I say good for you guys, because I sit there, and it's funny that you use the same word I was going to use. Like, watching you all chisel.
yeah.
I'm like, okay, well, near the top of the list of things I'm never going to do is be chiseling near a battery of any kind. With any kind, my wife and daughter are here, they can vouch for my lack of being handy. But then to see you sell them too, I thought, man, how cool would that be to have, like, you, like, I watch this thing get torn down, and I can have one of them. My wife humors me out a lot when it comes to cars. I wasn't going to push for that one. But I thought that was very cool. So that was one of my favorite ones. I appreciate the little backstory too. I didn't know about that. All right, Chris from Dirty Tesla. And I was actually talking to his wife earlier. Both Teslas are sufficiently dirty. She was telling me hers is as well. So
Yes.
So you have been one of the longest running public beta testers with the FSD beta. And I was watching those. You did that drive. You used to do I don't remember what you call it, but even with just the FSD, like back and forth, gave it a score every time, that's when I started watching. FSD beta. Watching your videos, it's clear that it's improved over time, no matter what some people think. Like, I remember the boxes around the cars when you first started doing it.
Right.
What would you say, if you could narrow it down to the top 2 things you've seen improve the most, what would those be?
So, yeah, that's a really good question. Number one would be the car's perception, especially of objects in the real world. So in the 10.69 branch, they added the occupancy network, which allows the car to basically recreate physical objects in its mind, is a way to think about it. And so it doesn't matter if it's a car or a dumpster or a traffic cone, anything that's at least big enough, the car can display that as an object in the 3D world and know that it needs to obviously avoid it or drive around it or whatever it needs to do. And before that, I think in the old beta when it had the radar, it was a lot better at detecting objects and especially smaller objects. I mean, I even had it on the display in one of my first videos in late 2020. There was a newspaper on the ground and it showed on the display that there was some debris in the road for like a flat newspaper. It was pretty mind-blowing. And when the radar was removed, a lot of that kind of was lost. So now that the car can, again, bring those objects into its mind and make sure it drives around them or avoids them, that helped a lot. And then the second thing is really its just perception of the world around it, and especially interaction with other cars. Again, these are all in general. Of course, beta still does real goofy things, often enough. But the way it interacts with other cars, again, for the most part, keeping a decent distance from them and getting in between them when it needs to make lane changes and things like that. It used to be, I guess a good word is a lot more rude than it is today. Getting maybe kind of close or cutting people off a little bit. It seems to be at least more rare of an occurrence than it used to be. So just its perception in general of everything happening around the car is extremely impressive compared to those early days. And if anyone hasn't seen the earlier videos, everything's still up. I think it's really important, especially when you have like a bad drive, if you're using beta yourself and you're like, oh, this thing is so annoying. Go back and watch, like, not even my videos or other videos on YouTube of beta from 2020, late 2020, early 2021. It is leagues different than it was back in the day. Back in the day was almost kind of scary, the types of things that the system would do. So.
And I know I've seen you say several times, whether it be on Twitter or comments on YouTube, that you go back and forth between the, holy cow, that was so stupid, and oh my gosh, my freaking car is driving me around.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a big thing. Like, if you take a step back, and I always try to like transport myself into the past and be like, all right, if it was 1990 and I showed this to somebody, you know, everyone on Earth would be losing their minds. Whereas now, yeah, exactly, yes. There you go. Whereas now, it's kind of like, yeah, it drives itself. That's pretty neat. I mean, I just took my buddy for a ride, and at the end of the ride, he's like, oh yeah, that was pretty cool. The car drove us, and it literally went from point A to point B. Again, doing a few goofy things, but I did nothing. And he's like, yeah, that was pretty neat. It did pretty good. Sometimes it was weird. I'm like freaking out. The car just drove us all over the place all by itself. This is insane. So
I just watched that video yesterday. I am going to say that was one chill dude.
he is very chill.
I
yes.
aspire to be that laid back. Anyway, that was a good video. I will say this too, real quick, just a comment on beta. We have it on our Model 3, and I have a new driver in our household, 16 in February of this year, and I have told him a long time, again, growing up with my dad, I rode motorcycles as well. My dad always told me it's all about defensive driving. Everybody around you is going to do the stupidest thing they can at the worst possible time. That's how I was trained to drive. And that's what I told my son. And I find myself a lot of times, even if I think, my wife can vouch for this, FSD Beta did something stupid, I'm like, guarantee I've seen a person do that. So,
right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Sorry. You may have heard this question already today, but what would be the number one piece of advice you would give to somebody starting? I happen to know there's a young man here I talked to earlier, and he's got his own channel about stuff, and he's like, well, there's not many subscribers. I say, hey, just keep at it if you love it. But what would be the one tip you give to somebody?
Yeah, sure thing. The number one thing is, if you're going to do any of that stuff, it's got to be something you want to do and you love to do, rather than like, oh, like, you know, I know these big YouTubers can make tons of money. Obviously, if you can be successful, you can make lots of money, like, you know, MKBHD or some of these bigger channels, or like, you know, something like that. But it's really rare, and it's got to be something that even if it's not doing well, you like to do it anyway. So when I first started my channel, it was, I'm sure most people here can relate. You know, you get this car, and I never cared about cars at all. I'd always buy the cheapest car I could get, the most efficient car I could get, because I just wanted to get point A to point B reliably and not spend a lot of money. So, you know, my most expensive car before my Model 3 was a used Ford Focus, you know. And so once I got this car, I was like, I am so obsessed with this thing. I didn't realize it was going to be this amazing, and I just wanted to tell everyone about it. Especially, again, being in like Metro Detroit, like a lot of people here are. People think EVs are dumb. They think they only go 50 miles. You know, they think they're unreliable. And I was like, I have to tell everybody. I want to talk about this. And the people around you get a little sick of it after a while. So I go to this outlet, which, you know, I chose YouTube to talk as much as I wanted, and only people that want to hear it are going to show up for the most part. And so it was so much fun for me to just interact, even to this day, to interact with people online and go back and forth and help teach people who, you know, things to us that are obvious now, like what is a kilowatt hour, or what does kilowatt mean? What's the difference between those? Even just simple stuff. To us, simple stuff like that, just talking about that with people has been so much fun. So yeah, you really got to like want to do what you're going to do outside of any like, besides any like outside factors.
All right, thank you. I do have a couple follow-up questions I thought of myself. Real quick, for Brian, you had mentioned Europe and kind of that thing got lost because of politics. I'll put it that way. Would you ever see? Because I don't know too much about charging and everything in Europe, although I hear about Norway all the time. Would you envision chargers over there ever adding NACS, or not really, because like Tesla's kind of the leader of that, but even they have CCS over there?
So Tesla in the US is positively ginormous in terms of the EV market. In Europe, they're very big, but there's all kinds of companies from all different countries. You know, there's French cars and Spanish cars, and not Spanish, but you know, Italian cars, and a lot are coming from China. I'm sure Cory has seen cars that we have never heard of in some cases, and they're all already not interested in NACS. So even though it's more elegant, it's a better solution, I just don't see it coming. The thing I'd like to see is more options on the road, because they get a lot of cars that we don't get, that we will never see. Cars with 80 miles of range or 100 miles of range, that doesn't work for us. But in the UK, not very many people are driving over 100 miles in a day. It's not a huge country. And then, and you've got little, like the Citroen $8,000. It's an adorable little car, and it only goes 45 miles an hour, but in France you can drive it at age 14, and some of them do. It's not a car, it's an electric quadricycle with doors and a windshield and an airbag. It's got all that. But really the big thing is China is not coming. China's already here. And when I say here, I don't mean the US, because we've got 28% import tariffs on Chinese-made cars. That's making it very difficult for anyone to even put their toes in the water. Polestar's trying a little. But in Europe, they don't have that protectionist policy. So we've got BYD, we've got Aura. There's a bunch of very compelling cars. And it is expected that by the end of this year, there will be 10 additional brands importing electric cars into Europe. And that is, you know, I'm not sure how Volkswagen's planning to address that kind of competition. So as that pertains to chargers, all of those are already going to be wired for, you know, the CCS. And so I hope that answers that.
It does. So America, much like our inches and miles, and we will be an island unto ourselves. Follow up for Cory, it actually, something you said like led right into it. So I have heard over and over, including on a podcast this week, Sandy say, people keep saying China's coming, China's here, which is what you just said. That aside, with what you all have seen, knowing the people you know, and if you can't answer this question, just tell me. You personally, who are you excited about among the American car companies with EVs and what you foresee coming out from them?
First, Ford, because of Jim Farley. So I think Jim Farley was the first to actually address the fact that Tesla is leading. He had the humility to say that multiple times in different interviews, and all while Mary Barra wouldn't even say the word Tesla or Elon's name. For years and years, Mary Barra would be interviewed on Bloomberg, and the interviewer would say, "What do you think about Tesla this?" And her response would not have the words Tesla or Elon, and she would sidestep it. So I think Jim Farley And he has the right approach separating their EV business, and I think they have a lot of good stuff to come. So they did get quick to the market with the Mach-E and the F-150, and we've reviewed those on our channel, and we've shot a lot of arrows at them. They're pretty complex when it comes to the level of integration on the thermal system, the efficiency of the battery integration, but I think that Ford is right up there. And I also think Rivian makes a great product, but they have a cost problem, which is pretty obvious. Their vehicles are very expensive. When we did the cost analysis on the Rivian, it's just so feature rich. The suspension costs are astronomical. The brakes, the quad motor, 4 gearboxes. I mean, it's just, if you want to get a lot as a consumer, buy a Rivian because it's loaded with features and materials that really satisfy the customer's needs, but it doesn't satisfy the shareholders' needs. So as a business proposition, I think Rivian is really making a lot of headway, particularly with their software. Now, when you talk about China, I want to go back to China. The European OEMs and some American OEMs are losing a ton of ground in China because China's EV development is so amazing in China. So the China market is huge. It's been growing for years and years. And so you'll see VW and GM and Ford are losing ground in China, and then China is gaining ground in Europe. So you see this switch of OEMs losing ground and then gaining ground in Europe. So you have to kind of factor both in, and Tesla's success in China is really kind of amazing because it's not a joint venture, which a lot of times China pushes for joint ventures. So I think the Chairman Xi's leadership in China to push EVs at a national level has really put them at an advantage from a manufacturing perspective as well, because I think they own 83% of the world's battery manufacturing capacity. So there's a lot of factors at play. And back to your original question, I think for the US, Ford and then Rivian are up there for me.
All right. Yeah, I remember as soon as Ford, I can only imagine how excited he was in your offices. As soon as Ford announced that, Sandy posted, or somebody posted on Sandy's behalf, pointing back to the video that he did where he had Jim Farley and them there. And he's like, see, I told them a year ago that they should do this.
So, funny story. I was tipped off that announcement was coming about an hour and a half before. So, because of that, I told Eric, I think Eric left, there was a few of us on our team. I said, I need to find that clip. I know it's in the public of Sandy asking Doug Field and Jim Farley, hey, what are you going to do about NACS? And Eric, you found it, didn't you? He searched and searched and searched. We finally found it. We clipped it. We posted it because we wanted to take a little credit where credit was due. So
I enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun. So we still have maybe about 15, 20 minutes, if that's okay.
Can I actually ask Cory a question?
I was just going to say, does anyone have a question for anybody else?
Have you guys torn down the chargers themselves?
So we are currently doing a level 2 teardown series where we've torn down, I think, 6 or 7 or 8 of them, but they're not that exciting. They're commodities from China, so most of them are manufactured in China or in the U.S. a little bit with commoditized parts. But are you talking level 3?
I'm talking Electrify
So,
America.
unfortunately,
You just got to back over it hard enough, and it's yours, my friend.
So the answer is yes, but I can't talk about it. So these are very expensive. You can't just call them up and buy one. And we are doing some work for a few clients that do manufacture these. I can't name names, but there's a lot of improvement to be had. And
So I'll just start asking questions, and you either say no, so just process of elimination.
That's right. Let's talk to me afterwards. All right. Does anybody else up here have a question for anyone else up here?
I have a question for Chris. What age of student driver is your car?
Well, you know, we're getting into the 16 to 18 range. I really believe for most of it. The thing is as being a computer and AI, you get these weird things that just out of nowhere it does really strange, seemingly randomly. Of course, in the computer's brain, it has a reason for what it did, but to the outside world, it's not very smart. And then you also have these things that actually kind of enjoy at this point, these consistent bugs. where, so one I always talk about recently is, as a lane opens up to your right or left, the car, like say a right turn lane, the car will just kind of drift into that right turn lane, even though you're not turning for 5 miles. And you have to take over because it doesn't even think about it. It'll just charge at the end of that lane. Now, what I like about that is it's a very consistent thing. The car does incorrectly that on Tesla's side, if they would do it, they could fix that, right? Whereas back in the day, 2 years ago or something with beta, you just have, there was no consistency in the wrongdoings that you saw. You'd be driving straight down a road and all of a sudden the steering wheel's flying off to the right. And that was scary and very bad. Those types of things are much more rare. So I really do believe in terms of the braking distance, again, in general, for the most part, braking distance, acceleration, takeoff times at green lights and things, it's looking really good on a general level. So I would say around 18-ish years old. Yeah.
At what blood alcohol content?
Sometimes 0, sometimes, or a little too much.
It's wearing the goggles.
So I actually have a follow-up question, but for Mike. So Mike, you're a lawyer.
Yeah.
And when do you think will in the future will be the first time somebody's actually suing the robot? So is this 5 years or 10 years in the future where people stop taking responsibility for what they're doing behind the wheel?
I cannot directly answer your question, mainly because I'm like what I refer to as a boring kind of lawyer who doesn't have the kind of stories you want to listen to. I'm an estate planning and business transaction lawyer. The litigators have all the good stories. That's actually not false. They have some pretty cool stories. I honestly, my own personal opinion, knowing nothing about the law, just from a practical in that area, practical standpoint, I think that's going to be driven more by insurance companies than will anything else. That would be my guess. They drive a lot, pun not intended. But I'm going to say something that's not an answer to your question at all, but it's where I thought you were going, so I'm going to answer the question you didn't ask. I will say one of the things, and just talking with my friends, they're like, oh, this is going to be great and everything, and I will say, maybe I'm cynical, but I see the NACS and everything like that, and I've been involved, at least in Michigan, been involved with writing some legislation, things like that. I've seen behind the curtain, see how the process works. And my biggest concern, personally, based on nothing but my own opinion, for Tesla going forward is going to be regulatory and political. Because the more something is used, the more likely they want to regulate it, and they want to regulate it the way they feel is best. Which is totally not the question you asked, but there's just a little something I want to put in there.
So actually, I have a little tiny response to that. When first Smart Summon first came out, where the car can drive itself in a parking lot, and you do not need to be in the car. It is literally driving itself while you just watch from a distance. I actually called my insurance company, and I asked, and I said, hey, my car has this ability now. And I explained it, and I was like, but what if I hit someone? Or what if someone hits me? Am I responsible? I'm not in the car. What's going on? And the person was very confused and didn't really know how to respond. And they said, I'm going to have to send that a little higher. They said, off the bat, I'm going to say it's as if you're driving, but if you're not, and they kept reaffirming, wait, you're not sitting in the driver's seat. I was like, no, there's not a human in the car. And they said, yeah, you're going to have to get a call back on that. And I never did. So maybe I should follow up because at that time they had no idea.
I am pretty confident it's you, because there have been cases out there, not being an insurance attorney, but I am aware of cases out there where somebody rigged up their car with like you'd use for an RC car, and they drove that way, and it is totally you.
I'm sure, but I wanted to hear what they were going to say. So
it would have been really fun if you heard back from them.
Yeah.
They're probably super happy you didn't keep calling. All right, we got like 10 minutes left. So, if you guys are cool with it, does anybody out there have a question that they want to? All right, we got one right here. Make sure you speak really loud.
I'm good at that.
Okay.
I'd like to see more work done to prop this fun. I always get calls of neighbors and friends that say, put the car's going to run out of charge, grip can't handle it. There's a lot of issues. how do we stop that stuff?
So how do we stop the FUD? People complaining you can't charge. There's
Real quick, just so people know, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That's what it stands
yes,
for.
yes.
Because I didn't know until about 2 years
I
ago.
see. Yeah, there's a lot of moneyed interests that have that stand to benefit from people not going EV. It's going to strain the grid. You can't charge with when it rains. You get all kinds of nonsense. And how do we combat that? Well, the best thing I can suggest is send people links to my videos, because that's what I do. Every week I'm addressing these things, because some of the concerns you see are absolutely insane. I've seen people say the Cybertruck will fail because no fleet buyers would ever buy it. And I said, it's dollars and cents. These guys would buy a cardboard box with a motor if it was the cheapest legal option. It doesn't matter. So you just gotta. So that's what I do for a living, I guess. But other than that, what do you guys think?
I do have a quick follow-up to that. It's hard because I totally agree. There's so much out there of this misinformation, but from like a YouTube perspective, when you try to make videos kind of combating that, it's not a popular topic. So number one, you don't get a whole lot of views on it, and it's hard to justify your time making those things if you're not going to get views. And the views, for me personally, I end up getting are a lot of people that just agree. So it's not very helpful when somebody that already knows all the information and agrees comes and comments and says, "Oh, you're totally right." So there's got to be another source, because those videos just don't really take off. And Stephanie and I did make that one video where we like pretended it was a terrible experience, and I did end up getting a lot of comments in there from haters that were like, "Oh, see, this is terrible," and then it's like, "Aha, I tricked you. Come watch the video." So you gotta go about it like that.
Yeah, and what Munro and Associates is doing to address this is we actually do something called an EV primer, and we charge $10,000 for a 4-hour meeting where we have groups come in from tier 1s, tier 2s, sometimes OEMs, because even inside the OEMs, there are people that have developed transmissions their whole lives, or they do exhaust systems or air induction systems, or they're calibrators for diesel engines, and there's a huge ingrained anti-EV sentiment inside of OEMs, tier 1s and tier 2s. So we do these we call it EV primers, where it's a really in-depth technical explanation of EVs are a real thing and they do drive. And so we do this on a bespoke level, and it's really valuable as some of these tier 1s and tier 2s are trying to transition out of what they make for internal combustion engine vehicles and into something that is manufactured for EVs.
So I just want to jump in. Who's gonna combat the FUD? It's you. It's me. It's all of us. Okay? And I want to give a shout out to Kelly, Beth, and Bert, because they rented a beach house, and we did the bag stuffing event yesterday, all the swag bags. We got together and put all the stuff in them. And the neighbor from across the street, I don't even know if they're here, but I talked to them. In fact, I was a little late coming up to the stage because they were talking to me. They were so intrigued by all the vehicles that were there. They came over and started talking to us and asking us all the questions, right? How much is the range? How long does it take to charge? How much does it cost to charge? What if I want to take a road trip? What's the maintenance like? What problems have you had? Right? All these things. And we need to be the ones to do that. I don't think it can come from a central organization. It helps, obviously, YouTube University, but I think they're ready to buy a vehicle. I mean, I showed them how to plot a trip and all these kind of things, and so it's all of us getting out there and getting butts and seats, as we always say, right? There was I think it was Motor Trend had a quote that said, "We can tell people until we're blue in the face about instant torque at 0 RPM, right? And they all ignored us. You put them in a Tesla Plaid today. At that point it was a ludicrous, right? You put them in a P90D ludicrous, and they go full Tourette's, right? Like, holy, right? And then they're like, okay, I get it. I want one of these. This is awesome, right? And that's what all of us do. And that we need to be there for that. And all of us here can give you tools, whether it's YouTube, whether it's flyers, all these kind of things. But you're the front line of all this.
Yeah. Hobby had some articles from your company about the grid can survive, and that's a real important. I guess.
Yeah, and I think we have that flyer. If I'm not mistaken, it should be in all your swag bags, and I can give you PDFs of it if you want to share it.
All right, I will just add real quick because I see Kelly is there, and I'm not going to upset the boss. But I very much agree with Karl. I will, just based on my personal experience, is talking with people and being kind. I mean, that's really the thing. I've seen it. You see all sorts of things on Twitter. And there's some that's like, and maybe it's because I was exposed to a lot of different cars when I was growing up. And I love our Teslas. I wouldn't have two of them if I didn't love them. But at the same time, knowing that there's some people who are never going to have a Tesla, and just educating on them. I have a coworker who has a Mach-E. She loves it. It's her little. I could never imagine this coworker, who hopefully doesn't watch this video, having a vanity plate on her car. Ever. She does not care about cars, but she cares about Lil Blue, and that's her Mach-E. So I think just being kind with people and humoring the questions that seem so basic to us. Really, I know my wife has mentioned sometimes when she's supercharging, people come up and like, can I drive it in the rain?
Can you take it through a car wash?
Yeah, can you take it through a car wash? Can you drive it in the rain? Which seems weird to all of us,
No.
but think about it from somebody who doesn't have that context. When I was growing up, don't get anything electrical wet, right? Or you're putting it in a bag of rice, and these are too big to put in a bag of rice. So, you know what I mean? For a lot of people, that's where they're coming from, and maybe that's part of my IT background is I was customer facing IT, and I would get questions. But yes, we started with, did you reboot first? But just, you're there. You seem like a really nice guy. I heard you talk with other people there, so just being nice when they're asking you the questions, I think, would be the big one. All right, so we got one question in. Kelly, you're up. I don't know what's next. So,
Do you need something?
do you need? You tell me what to do.
I just want to know if any of you guys have a wireless. Cory, do you have a wireless mic, or Chris, so that I can walk around with people? All right, so all we have is corded mics.
I do.
No, this kind of. Yeah.
Where is it?
I thought you made it about like.
Oh, no.
Do you want to do one or two more?
Yeah, we can do it.
Yeah.
We can just
We got like 5 minutes.
we can just repeat
All right.
the question.
I saw. I don't know if that's officially the Flash, but
You want to come up? Yeah, I'm going to bring him up right here. You ask a question,
Yeah, here.
bring it out.
I know Rivian just purchased a better route planner.
yeah, we'll have you stand up.
I know, well, it's nice. It's nice to finally meet you. I've watched all your videos. I know you better than anybody else here because I watch the videos.
Thank you.
You have so many best friends, Cory.
Thank you for coming.
I know Rivian just purchased a better route planner. I just want to know your guys' thoughts on that. If do you think Tesla has anything planned for that in the market, or where they are with the whole plans of everybody planning where chargers are, which ones aren't on the market, which ones are you can be seen from the software and stuff like that.
So from a route planning perspective, I don't know if you've ever heard the story about how Sandy and I took our 8,000-mile road trip. We actually got in our Model 3, and I typed the word Malibu into it and hit go, and it planned the route all the way from Michigan to Malibu, California, and we just left, the car packed with all of our luggage. So from day one, my route planning experience with Tesla has been phenomenal, and it wasn't until I drove the Lightning to Chicago a couple months ago where it really was not a pleasant experience. I ended up going to a charge station with 2 chargers, and one wasn't working, and it was at a truck. It was at a truck repair place with no bathrooms and no food. And so I think route planning is very important, especially in the next 5 years. But I think after 5 years from now, particularly with OEMs switching to the Tesla network, it will be less important. But right now, I think it's a good move for Rivian, because if they stick to CCS for a little bit, it'll help them in the interim. And just a little side note, my initials are actually CCS. And I see all these tombstones with CCS on it. CCS is dead, CCS is dead. And I'm like, I don't know if anybody ever knew that. Cory Charles Steuben, so I'm alive.
I certainly hope he's not. All right, gentleman right here with the famous, it didn't quite work like Franz thought it would. Shirt.
Exactly.
Okay, I actually have a comment and then a question for Chris. And he already heard this comment from me earlier, but I want to hear if the crowd agrees with me. His best videos are the ones that Stephanie is in with him. Yeah! Yep.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Okay, so my question. With FSD, clearly we've seen a steady progression. It's been getting better. But one of the things that Elon's been teasing us with lately is soon it's going to be AI end-to-end. When AI end-to-end happens, my theory on this, and I've heard other people say the same thing, is the S-curve is going to get much steeper because as mistakes are made by the software and are corrected by the human drivers, that's going to feed back to the mothership, and then it's going to get pushed out to all the other cars in the fleet. And so consequently, we could see the biggest challenge, I think, with FSD is edge cases. And the more edge cases happen in the real world, the faster that data gets collected, the faster it can react. And so that I think having the AI end-to-end is going to make a huge improvement with how quickly it improves. So,
Yeah, so it actually kind of relates back to what they were talking about earlier with charging, and it's all about the data. And we know that Tesla, even if their cars aren't quite as capable, it depends on how you look at it, but if you look at something like Waymo or Cruise, those cars drive without a human in them. Point A to point B, very rare for them to make mistakes. They go hundreds of thousands of miles between issues, which you need to go farther than that. But as of now, that's how it stands. What Tesla's advantage is they have probably over 1 million cars by this point on the road driving with the self-driving hardware. So they're getting hundreds of millions of miles worth of data for, like you said, these edge cases to kind of solve these things. So my comment is, of course, from a consumer perspective, I don't have like technical information for you or that kind of background. But with AI, the good things are the data they're going to collect. That's kind of the positive. The negative is where if any of you have used like ChatGPT or any of these types of services, the kind of hallucinations they call it, where the system almost fills in the blanks on its own where it doesn't have data, and it'll just kind of make something up on the fly that's to a human completely nonsensical. And that's where Tesla's going to have to collect all that data to make sure those things don't happen. But I think they're in a really good position to at least collect a good amount of data to make these things continue to progress and get better. But again, from a personal experience, I'm still a little skeptical on the hardware side. I truly believe we need a little more hardware, even if it just has to do with redundancy of systems, that if you have something fail, the car is not totally, incapable at that point in the middle of a highway or something. So, I think the neural net, it's going to be one of these things where when we get that version 12 update or whatever, initially, like we see often, it's probably not going to be as good as what you had, the week before the update. But then eventually it's going to be better than what you could have imagined or what you expected.
So the problem I've seen with the AI approach and any approach to self-driving is if you look back to 2012, absolutely every company was confident that not only would they have it by in 2012, that everyone would have it by 2020. Everyone, us, them, everybody. Nissan kept reiterating that target up through 2016 before quietly just dropping it. And the task is so much bigger than anyone in the industry realized. And you know that because when AI Day 2 happened and we got to see behind the curtain and see this is how we plot our way through an intersection, all the other guys went back to their providers and said, so what are we doing to tackle that same problem? And they said, you're not going to like it. And then the founder of Comma AI departed his own company. Argo lost all their funding because what they were all doing was still inadequate. Now, is what we're doing adequate? We don't know because it's still over the horizon and it's not just unknown, but unknowable. So will Dojo make all the difference? Will it fix it? We hope so, but it's just unknown. And like Chris was saying, when a whole new bunch of data comes in, it's still imperative to have a human oversee it because you've seen some pretty goofy mistakes with other forms of AI that aren't hauling 6,000 pounds down the road at 80 miles an hour. So.
All right. What are your thoughts, Casey? It's 5 after 3. I know there's other stuff.
We gotta get the VIP here. Ted, get up here. Just so everybody knows, this is Ted. He's the one who saved Plaid Day tomorrow by paying for the insurance policy that came in way.
Thank you.
Ted.
So I have a comment about the multi-unit dwelling. I live in an apartment. I have no home charger, and I've driven Tesla for 2 years now, all public. And I do a lot of road trips, so I've seen what other cities have done. There are a lot of solutions out there, but we need to get city government involved. I've been writing letters to my mayor, to my alderman. Montreal has curbside charging. Every 3 blocks, instead of a parking meter, there's a 2-headed plug share charger, or a charge point charger. Atlanta City Hall, all around their parking lot, has 4 tops. Like, parking lots, it's right in the middle, and there's 4 cars around it that can all plug in. My friend in Boston, they put them up on light poles, and you activate it in the app, and the cord comes down, and you plug it in, so it's not buried in the snow or anything. So there are solutions out there. We just got to ask for them. And one thing that I keep saying, when we all switch to electric cars, we don't all suddenly become homeowners. There are lots of people who rent, who have no management company, they just rent the house or whatever. You can't install a home charger. Street charging, L2s everywhere you park. We need to push for that.
Thank you for that. I was going to say that combined with what Karl said of getting a hold of the utilities, because there's programs out there. I think that
One neat thing that I've seen that they're doing already in Europe is BP will come in, and you know how all these street lights, they've been refitting them. They used to use 200, 300 watt sodium bulbs, and now they're all LEDs pulling 15, 20 watts. There's excess capacity, and BP already has a program they're running in Europe where they can go in and in 20 minutes pop the socket out, the access port, and put all the electronics inside for an access point. Now it's level 1, it's a trickle charger, but it's on every street post. It's everywhere.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it earlier, but look this up, Orange Charger. And again, what they do is they basically replace an existing 20 amp outlet. Now it's an outlet, you got to carry your own cord. Because one of the things they found is one of the things that's damaged the most is the cord. And if you look in Europe, by the way, the EV chargers are typically just an outlet. You bring your own cord, right? But it has a QR code. It's networked. It's got a mesh network, so it'll work on Wi-Fi. It'll work on cellular network. It's a pretty neat solution. I got a test unit of this, and it works really, really well. It's just an orange-shaped outlet with a QR code, and you establish an account. You plug in your EVSE. And you start charging. So that's another solution. It's not the solution, but yeah, I agree. Light posts.
You gotta start asking for it.
Yes, please do. Because like from a utility standpoint, like at least in Michigan, we don't own the chargers. All we can do is support the municipalities, support the MDUs, support those that actually need the charging, but keep asking. Those of you in Michigan, I don't know if you know the downtown charger in Hart, next to Hart Pizza, and it's a great coffee shop, and it kept going down. And I started asking, "Hey, are you gonna get it fixed?" And now they're gonna, pursue it with ChargePoint because they realize they're losing business. So it takes all of us, just like with EV adoption and getting people involved, and ask those questions. Go to the hotels. I always ask at hotels when I already know the question. Do you guys have an EV charger? Because I have an EV and I'd sure love to charge. And if you don't, I'm going to start going to your competition, right? Things like that.
I have to say, for that thing in Boston, that Boston thing you mentioned, I'd like that just for the cool factor of how it comes down to charge.
Yes, tables aren't sitting